He is a young genius blessed with a promising future and a gorgeous girlfriend, seemingly living the perfect dream. However, everything falls apart when he is expelled from his party and is forced to rebuild his life from nothing all over again. Determined to rise back up, he gathers a band of social rejects and guides them toward becoming the most powerful tripass party on the planet. The tale opens with Nick's world being completely turned upside down after he is kicked out of his party, the Masters of War, by Argus, a man he respected and admired like a father. As if that blow were not enough, his so-called girlfriend betrays him and breaks up with him on that exact same day. Completely devastated, Nick sits alone on a fountain while rain pours down, soaking him to the bone as he remains too broken to even care. His thoughts drift back to his argument with Argus, where Nick refuses to forgive a man named Gasso, who stole all of their hard-earned money just to impress a random girl. Argus twists the situation around, calls Nick selfish, and tells him he lacks what it takes to be an adventurer. He reminds Nick that he took him in when he was still a child and coldly tells him to go find somewhere else where he truly belongs. Just as Nick is on the verge of collapsing emotionally, a blue-haired girl suddenly appears, holding an umbrella. She casually remarks that he looks like a stray dog and nonchalantly hands him a ticket to her idol concert. Nick stares at her and bluntly says she does not look like an idol at all, then asks why she is even standing there. The girl replies that she is just getting started and explains that cheering people up is both her job and her passion. She leaves him her umbrella and runs off, telling him to make sure he comes to her concert. Although Nick has no desire to attend, he somehow ends up going to see the performance of the girl named Agate. Before he realizes it, he transforms into a hardcore idol otaku, spending all of his savings on every piece of merchandise he can buy. Wanting to earn more money to support his sincere otaku lifestyle, Nick heads to the Adventurers Guild and begins searching for rookies to form a brand new party. While there, he notices a man and attempts to strike up a conversation. However, the moment Nick approaches, the man pretends to be clueless, and Nick ends up failing to speak with anyone at all. After wasting so much time, he drags himself to a tavern and orders the cheapest item on the menu simply to avoid starving to death. He looks around the room, watching everyone laugh, and wonders if he will ever be able to laugh like that again. At that moment, 3 adventurers enter the tavern and take seats at his table. At first, Nick thinks they might already be a party, but since none of them even speak, he concludes that they are all loners just like him. One of them is a powerful yet graceful-looking magic user. From her crystal staff and flashy outfit, Nick assumes she must be a noble. After staring at her for a moment, his gaze shifts to a drunken cleric who looks like he has already been expelled from his church. Then he turns to the third adventurer, a dragon girl. Nick offers her a friendly smile, but she remains completely serious, her expression not changing in the slightest. Just then, their drinks are brought to the table. Nick sinks deeper into despair and begins spiraling, thinking that anyone he gets close to will only betray him in the end, and wondering if he will ever be able to trust someone again. He chugs his drink in one motion and slams the mug onto the table, only to hear the others do the exact same thing as they shout together that they cannot trust anyone either. The group freezes, staring at each other in total shock. The wealthy mage among them, named Tana, is the first to begin telling her story. One day, after successfully casting a lightning spell which in this world requires combining water and wind magic, she receives high praise from her schoolmaster. Overjoyed, she rushes off to share the news with her fiancé, Alex. When she arrives, she finds him sitting beside a random girl named Lynn. Tana sits next to him, too kind-hearted to even realize he is cheating, and happily talks about how impressed her teacher was with her lightning magic. Eventually, she notices the girl next to him and asks who she is. Suddenly, her fiancé starts accusing Tana of bullying Lynn at school and launches into a rant, claiming that all she ever does is boast about her magical abilities. He abruptly snaps, saying he has always felt inferior because of her. Right then and there, he breaks off their engagement, abandons Tana on the spot, and marries Lynn right in front of her. After graduating from school, the devastated Tana searches for work. Everywhere she goes, she is rejected, with people saying that a noble lady like her is far too delicate for real labor. After being turned away repeatedly, Tana ends up at a racetrack, where she somehow wins several bets in a row and earns a large sum of money. She becomes instantly addicted, but before long, she loses everything and ends up penniless, barely able to afford rent. She then attempts to find an adventuring partner, but anyone who sees her is intimidated by the fierce, cold expression on her face. She even forces herself to smile, but nothing changes. With all hope exhausted, she ultimately finds herself sitting in this tavern beside Nick. Nick then turns to the cleric, whose name is Zen, and asks him to share his story. Zen explains that he once served as a cleric in a small, insignificant city. There was a young girl named Muriel who helped him gather herbs in exchange for a little money. Everything was normal until one day, the girl suddenly fell in love with him and even held his hand, asking him to marry her. Zen gently declined, explaining that he was a man of the cloth and could not marry. The moment he refused the underage proposal, the girl burst into tears and ran away, calling him a jerk as she disappeared. A few days later, just as Zen was about to be promoted to high cleric, guards suddenly appeared looking for him, with Muriel standing behind them, appearing as though something terrible had happened to her. Zen rushed toward her, but the guards restrained him. The girl accused him of serious crimes, and before he could defend himself, Zen was thrown into prison. He spent the next 3 months locked away, and when he was finally released, he was banished, with everyone labeling him a pervert. After being cast out, Zen ended up staying at an inn with a woman. There, he helped ease her back pain, and in return, she suggested he go to the Labyrinth City and become an adventurer. Zen explains that this is how he became a womanizer and eventually ended up sitting in this tavern. After hearing both stories, Nick says he cannot believe a single word they told him and asks whether they feel the same. Zen, however, boldly declares that he intends to defeat the Demon King. Nick then turns to the Dragonian named Curran and asks her to share her story as well. She simply shouts that something extremely important was stolen from her, and even worse, it was taken by the person she trusted the most. Nick then reveals his own past, explaining how a girl named Claudine dumped him and how he later discovered that she had been using him the entire time. Suddenly, Nick wakes up upside down with his face pressed against the floor. It becomes clear that all of them had been sleeping in the same room. He quickly stands up, wakes the others, and tells them to leave, only to realize that it is not his room. Jenna calmly tells him that he is the one who should leave, since it is her place. Before you go, answer me this. Is this really fine? Can we actually earn enough to survive? We all have something pushing us forward. Whether it's idols, food, gambling, or women. I don't know about you, but I care about the things that give my life meaning. So here's my idea. Why don't we create our own party? Later that morning, the 4 outcasts walk into the guild together, glaring at a young receptionist as if she somehow owes them something. An older guild woman appears and scolds them for making the cute receptionist cry. She recognizes Nick from the Masters of War and begins reviewing their guild registration paperwork. She points toward Curran and explains that she is the well-known survivor girl who reportedly returned alive after clearing a C-rank dungeon entirely on her own. She goes on to say that staying alive is the single most important rule for adventurers and then asks what their party is called. Nick answers confidently that their name is Survivor, smiling as he says that no matter what happens, they will always make sure they come back alive. The rest of the group agrees with the choice and loudly repeats their newly chosen party name. Once the registration process is finished, Nick introduces 3 rules for their new team. These rules include never interfering with each other's hobbies, always keeping a close eye on their money, and ensuring that everyone returns alive no matter the circumstances. Rather than letting just one person manage the funds, Nick suggests that they all take shared responsibility for protecting their savings. As he explains his idea, the group starts laughing and joking that Nick would probably be the worst possible person to crack open a safe anyway. At that point, Z looks at Nick and asks why he is being so overly cautious about money, prompting Nick to briefly mention his past as an explanation. ZM comments that Nick essentially wants them to both trust and doubt one another at the same time, which Curran finds somewhat irritating. Even so, they all admit how badly they wish they could trust someone again, but they agree to remain cautious for now, purely for their own protection. The party then heads to the Sticky Aqueducts, which turns out to be one of the 3 labyrinths they are permitted to explore while they remain stuck at the starting G rank. Nick takes charge and explains that once they successfully clear 2 dungeons, they will be promoted to F rank. He continues by pointing out that these particular dungeons function as training grounds designed for beginners to get used to the adventurer lifestyle. As Nick continues his explanation, he suddenly steps on something slimy, though luckily it does not turn out to be a trap. He then introduces the very first target of the survivors' party, which happens to be a small, harmless-looking slime quietly chewing on weeds. Everyone immediately comments on how cute the little creature looks. However, Nick explains that despite its harmless appearance, the slime can grow into a dangerous monster capable of eating livestock if it sneaks into a farm. He demonstrates how to deal with a slime, completely shocking everyone when he casually removes its core. That alone is enough to defeat it. He finishes by reminding them to collect all of the crystals, explaining that they can be exchanged for money later. As they make their way upward, Zen teases Tiana by asking whether joining the party was just another gamble for her. This causes her to protest, complaining to Nick that Z is breaking the rules by interfering in her personal affairs. Nick smiles quietly and wonders to himself whether forming this party may actually have been the right choice. Z then attempts to defeat a slime and admits that it feels wrong to take the life of another creature. The group tries to reassure him, and they end up discussing why monsters attack humans in the first place, though no one manages to reach a clear conclusion. Nick reminds everyone to stay alert, while Tiana points out that the only noticeable change in the slimes so far is that they have become faster. She then brags about how she once defeated orcs and goblins, but immediately afterward, she trips. Nick calmly explains that the slimes in this dungeon shoot sticky fluid and are about as slippery as stepping on a banana peel. Embarrassed by her mistake, the mage angrily casts Icicle Dance, but she misses and accidentally fires the spell toward Curran, who barely manages to block it with her sword. Tana quickly asks if Curran is alright and apologizes, but Curran turns cold and warns her to be more careful, arguing that next time it might be her who gets hit by accident. This incident puts a strain on their newly formed bond, and the two girls begin avoiding each other. Sometime later, they arrive at the top floor of the dungeon, where Nick once again reminds everyone to stay alert. At that moment, Zen spots a massive slime monster, and Nick explains that it is the dungeon boss. Upon hearing this, the mage suddenly charges forward, claiming she can defeat it on her own, but instead ends up causing a huge mess. Afterward, the party is forced to wash their clothes by the river. Nick explains that giant slimes react to powerful magic by splattering slime everywhere. He then tells Z that his position should be in the rear and that he needs to rely on the others for protection. Nick removes his armor and openly reveals all of his strengths and weaknesses, even admitting that he has no knowledge of magic at all. When the others ask why he is sharing so much information, Nick explains that understanding each other better might help them build trust. He gives a short motivational speech to lift their spirits and keep them going. Hearing this, Z finally opens up and shares his own strengths and weaknesses as well. Tiana steps in front of Curran, bows deeply in apology, and then reveals her abilities too. This act seems to soften the dragonoid's heart. When Tiana later sits down and starts acting cold again, Curran sneezes and accidentally shoots a small ember toward her, starting a fire to warm her up. Curran jokingly claims she was trying to roast Tiana alive but simply missed. This small moment finally helps repair the tension between them. Next, the group travels to the Goblin Forest, where Nick explains that goblins are generally weak as long as no one gets surrounded by a large group. Suddenly, a goblin leaps out and attacks Z without warning, but fortunately, Z manages to deflect the strike. Nick immediately steps in and finishes the creature off. After that, the survivors face an entire horde of goblins, most of which Nick defeats on his own. It is then that Jenna reveals her detection skill. Using this ability, Jenna points out that one of the monsters is carrying far more magical energy than a normal goblin should. Nick tells the team that it is likely an ogre, an evolved form of a hobgoblin. The party briefly considers retreating, but ultimately decides to move forward, reasoning that the reward and the safety of potential victims outweigh the risks of leaving the goblins and ogre unchecked. They devise a strategy that relies heavily on Nick and Curran, since magic is ineffective against evolved ogres. As they move ahead, Curran and Shauna once again bring up their ongoing trust issues, eventually agreeing to give each other another chance. Suddenly, Curran senses a nearby monster and rushes toward it, with the others quickly following. Z casts a buff spell to enhance their strength, while Tana uses her magic to clear the path ahead. As the battle intensifies, the talking ogre commands its minions to attack. Curran's legs begin to shake as she struggles to trust Tiana again, and Tiana feels the same hesitation. In the end, the two place their trust in each other. Tiana casts her spell, which passes cleanly through Curran without harming her and wipes out all the goblins in its path. Curran then charges forward and, wielding her flaming sword, unleashes a fire dragon strike that brings the massive ogre down. After the battle, Mick begins collecting goblin horns as proof for their reward and asks the others to help. While placing a horn into her bag, Curran discovers a pendant that triggers a painful memory, leaving her quietly shaken. Shortly after, Nick encounters another ogre that appears to be in the middle of evolving. He struggles during the fight, and after pulling out the horn, he loses his grip. The horn slips from his hand and falls directly onto Curran's pendant, cracking it. A flashback follows, showing Curran lying motionless on the floor of a terrifying dungeon, groaning in pain as a massive nightmare-like insect crawls across her face and jolts her awake. She pulls out her pendant and stares at it, trying to understand that what she experienced was not just a dream from her time with her previous party. Back then, Curran was walking through the marketplace when a scheming merchant noticed how much she liked a pendant and attempted to scam her. As she walked away, the merchant shouted insults, claiming that dragons and monsters like her should watch themselves, accusing her of damaging his merchandise with her dirty paws, and threatening to call the knights if she did not pay. Curran began to panic, but a blonde man named Kalios appeared and reminded her to stay close to him while shopping. The merchant complained to Kalios about Curran's supposed mistake, so Kalios grabbed the pendant and told Curran to scratch it again, leaving both her and the merchant stunned. He boldly wagered that he would pay double if she was truly at fault, then had her peel the pendant like a potato, exposing the merchant's dirty trick. Without making a scene, Kalios pulled the real pendant Curran liked from his pocket, recovered his money, handed it to her, and made a smooth, confident exit. Dragonians are a proud demi-human race whose destiny is to support the hero and save the world, which is exactly why Curran devoted every single day to supporting Kalios's party. The following day, Curran is polishing her family's dragon gem when Kalios asks if she is ready to leave and tells her not to worry about her belongings, saying no one would dare steal from them. With that, Curran follows the man she proudly serves with all her heart on another mission, where the rest of the party once again showers her with praise. However, it is Kalios's approval that brings her the greatest happiness. Later, she offers to help with menial tasks, but Kalios tells her to trust the party and conserve her strength for when it truly matters. As they approach the boss monster, the pot snake, he reassures her that he has her back, and Curran charges forward without hesitation. She slams her shoulder into the pot, enraging the serpent and drawing its full attention, prompting the rest of the party to jump into the fight. She asks Kalios why it is glowing like that, but he keeps insisting that she should simply trust them and maintain its focus. She continues calling out to him until the serpent suddenly coils around her body and releases its poisonous breath, paralyzing her and leaving her struggling to breathe before collapsing helplessly like a sack of potatoes. The blonde man and his party proceed to collect the loot, casually thanking their sturdy dragon girl for serving as the perfect bait for the notoriously deadly poison. The final image she sees before losing consciousness is all of them walking away without sparing even a single glance back at her life. Sometime later, she manages to drag herself back using crutches, driven by pure anger and a firm resolve to recover the dragon gem her father gave her, since it was forged from the finest materials and had grown stronger together with her throughout her life. Filled with determination, she ultimately collapses just outside an inn, where the innkeeper informs her that Kalios and his party claimed she had died and then disappeared. She asks what happened to her belongings, and he replies that Kalios promised to return everything to her family. Curran recalls his warm smile and the way he told her to trust him, and she nearly throws away the filthy gift he left her. However, the grief overwhelms her completely, and her legs finally give out beneath her. After that, she enters a long period of soul-searching, until one day, while starving, she sees an adventurer burst into the tavern and quite literally blow the door open. She overhears people saying that he is Fifths, the famous solo eater. She quietly watches him enjoy his meal with the same joyful enthusiasm a Mexican shows when eating tacos, and somehow, the sight inspires her. As a result, she orders the exact same dish. Later, she learns that the man is a legendary solo hunter during the day and a passionate gourmet food lover at night. Because of this, she decides to follow him around every day, believing he cannot see her at all, like John Cena. Fifths eventually notices what she is doing and subtly starts giving her hints about what food to buy without drawing attention to it. The following day, she returns the favor by saving his sword from a drunk man at the tavern. In response, he offers her a simple thank you, but she thanks him sincerely from the bottom of her heart, because he is the man who taught her what truly good food tastes like and helped fill the massive emptiness left behind in her once innocent soul with food. Still, Curran soon realizes that eating all this delicious food requires money, which she does not have at all. And that is the day she ends up meeting everyone else at the guild. Back in the present, Nick searches everywhere for a pendant similar to Curran's and starts thinking that what scares him most is that she did not even get angry at him. At that moment, he suddenly hears Agate calling out from behind, pleasantly surprised that he no longer looks nearly as homeless as before. Later, he talks with her beside a fountain, where Agate bluntly tells him that it is pretty selfish to expect forgiveness simply by replacing her pendant. However, she adds that it is fine, since her own selfishness is what led her to meet him in the first place. She suggests that maybe Nick himself should become Curran's gift, which gives him a completely wrong idea. Sometime afterward, he finds Curran in the marketplace happily munching on freshly cooked squid balls. She tries to convince him to taste some extremely spicy dumplings topped with wriggling worms, which nearly send him straight to the afterlife. Still, Nick feels relieved and happy to see Curran smiling again. Later, he asks her whether the pendant truly meant that much to her. She tells him not to worry too much about it and explains that she actually feels much happier now that it is gone. Later on at the guild, the party's small gathering is interrupted by a cat girl who invites them to the back room. There, an elderly woman assigns them a quest to explore the labyrinth of bonds and recover a legendary artifact hidden deep inside. The old woman explains that their task is to locate the Kizuna blade and even promises to pay them each time they attempt the mission, even if they fail. Shocked that she is offering thousands for what sounds like a beginner-level job, Nick grows suspicious and insists that she reveal every detail she knows and put everything in writing so she cannot try anything shady when it comes time to pay. With the agreement settled, they charge into the dungeon as if it were just another casual adventure, hunting for the sword. While Nick cannot stop thinking about Curran's pendant, Z is impressed by the labyrinth's scientifically advanced construction. Nick tells everyone to stop chatting and focus on searching for any hidden pathways. Meanwhile, a mysterious voice observes their progress through surveillance cameras, eagerly watching to see whether this mismatched party can survive until the end. As they descend the stairs, Nick leads the group as far as their map allows until they reach a dead end. He quickly notices that the lamp should be glowing red rather than green. Acting immediately, Nick rushes forward, saying he likes to be thorough, and perhaps also because he smells a hidden room full of money like Mr. Krabs. A door suddenly opens, and they step inside. They discover a large, dark chamber lined with tanks. Tiana asks whether they seriously have to search the entire room, but Nick points out the obvious and heads straight toward the pedestal emitting a bright light. Tiana quickly stops them and uses her magical sight to scan for traps. The area appears suspiciously clear. However, the moment they approach the pedestal, the lights suddenly turn on, and a voice addresses the party, congratulating them on their courageous journey. As the old man's voice coming from the sword continues rambling nonsense, Nick ignores it and carefully inspects the broken sword resting there. Tana suggests it might be a magic sword, but Nick says it looks more like trash than his waifu, which immediately angers the talking blade. Nick tells the senile sword to stop going full Shakespeare on them and simply tell them where the Sword of Bonds is. To everyone's shock, the sword replies that it is exactly what they have been searching for. Pretending to play along with the old relic, Nick says he will not throw it away out of respect for its age, which makes the sword wonder why no one is equipping it. Once it realizes that none of them actually use a short sword, it begins panicking about what they intend to do with its greatness. Nick casually replies that they obviously plan to sell it for some easy cash. The sword immediately bursts into tears, crying that it does not want to be abandoned again like the liars at the guild. When Tana asks what the old man is even talking about, the sword explains that the guild that created it, the prototype sword Kizuna, sealed it within the labyrinth afterwards so no one could ever use it, and it has been waiting for a worthy partner ever since. Nick says he understands its feelings, but also understands money even more. Kizuna begs him to use its power for something good instead of dragging in a LAN, just as a nearby machine begins rumbling ominously to life. Suddenly, they hear a massive explosion, and Kizuna casually mentions that the Guardian is now officially on its way. Without warning, a massive goop monster crashes into the room, forcing everyone to flee. Janna fires sharp icicles directly into its grotesque face while Curran charges straight in to slice it cleanly in half. However, Kazuna senses something wrong, and before Nick can warn them, the creature reflects the icicles back at Curran, knocking her to the ground. Nick rushes forward to shield the others, attacking the monster and shouting for everyone to run while he draws its attention. He quickly realizes his attacks are completely ineffective as the sword explains that the Guardian is made of nanomachines and begs Nick to use its power, saying it is his only real chance of survival. Desperate, Nick's glowing blade of light grows larger while the others struggle to escape through an unbreakable door blocking their path. As Nick looks at each of them, the sword tells him to imagine Curran in his mind and chant union. Suddenly, the light vanishes, causing Nick to shout at the useless piece of junk for lying. He attempts to cut off part of the monster anyway, only for the Guardian to smash him away and launch him into a hole in the ground like a golf ball. Realizing that their attacks are useless, Tana comes up with the smart idea to freeze the monster with ice magic, giving Curran a chance to rescue Nick. The moment Curran jumps into the hole, however, the creature breaks free from the ice shell, leaving the two mages behind to stall it. Meanwhile, buried in the rubble, Nick realizes he has fractured several ribs and considers giving up, until he hears Curran calling out to him. He urges her to run away with the other two while there is still time, but that only makes her furious, and she snaps back that leaving is pointless unless all of them can return home together. Nick stands up and apologizes for damaging her pendant, even though she had already told him not to worry about it. Curran then reveals that the pendant was a gift from her party leader. And despite how enraged she was over his betrayal, she could never bring herself to throw it away, because deep down she had been hoping he might one day re-enter her life. However, she has now chosen to move forward and concentrate on the people who matter to her in the present. She surprises him by saying she is actually glad the pendant is gone and lifts his spirits with her warm, treasured smile. Watching their connection grow stronger, Kazuna asks Nick to activate it once again. Up on the surface, Tana finally gives in and tells Zen to stop wasting his spells on her and instead focus on rescuing Nick. As they exchange what might be their final words, a blinding burst of light erupts from behind the Guardian, which is blown to pieces by the fusion of Nick and Curran. Kazuna explains that the Guardian's core can shift freely throughout its body, making it nearly impossible to land a decisive strike. So Nick gathers an enormous amount of magic and pours it into a single, massive sword slash that illuminates the entire monster and completely annihilates its core. Even so, the two collapse afterward, and their fusion breaks apart. Meanwhile, back at the guild, they present the sword to the old woman and the catgirl, neither of whom seem particularly impressed. The old lady calls it rather disappointing, likely because it resembles an antique relic more than an actual sword, but she admits she will still pay them for all the trouble they endured, which Nick readily accepts. She then turns her attention to the small white-haired boy watching them from the back, who proudly introduces himself as Kazuna, the Sword of Bonds. Later, Kazuna laughs about how easily they managed to placate the guildmaster, causing Nick to question his own beliefs about justice and righteousness. Kazuna mischievously replies that everything he does is to save a life, his own. Zam, however, remains confused about how Kazuna works and worries that choosing such an obvious name is risky for someone who wants to stay under the radar. Later, in Tiana's room, Nick dumps a sack full of money onto the table, and everyone grows excited as they start imagining what they will splurge on with their earnings. Kazuna becomes a bit unsure about who he is supposed to stick with, but Nick reminds him of the survivor's first rule, which forbids interfering with each other's leisure time. He offers to take Kazuna to an idol concert, as long as he can remain silent in sword form the entire time. However, noticing that Kazuna already looks unbearably bored, Tana suggests taking him to watch a race on the forbidden grounds instead, on the condition that he does not criticize how she spends her money. The following day, Kazuna quietly takes in the beauty of the natural scenery around him, radiating such a poetic presence that the nearby survivors cannot help but notice. Tiana casually pulls out an igniter, immediately catching Kazuna's attention as he enthusiastically praises it. She smiles softly and drifts into her memories, thinking back to the days she spent with her professor. At the same time, teacher Nick rummages through some old relics to use as a safe, then brings out a handful of bronze coins and instructs everyone to guard them carefully. Apparently, that small pile is all the money they have left, so the party agrees to start taking on quests. The scene then transitions into Chana's past, returning to the time she graduated from magic school. She recalls the admitter her teacher gave her as a farewell present, along with the crushing guilt of how she ended up destroying the career of the professor she admired most. He was dragged into her scandal and lost his chance to obtain the sage title he had always dreamed of. Even so, he continued to look at her with a gentle smile. As their conversation continues, the professor suddenly bursts into laughter for no apparent reason, and it grows louder and more disturbing until it becomes clear he has lost his sanity and turned into a crazed laughing maniac. Tenno reflects on his condition with deep sorrow, wishing that things could somehow return to the way they once were. As she gets out of bed, she wonders if she might wake up back in her mansion. Meanwhile, Curran also awakens, with Zen following shortly after. At the same time, Nick finds himself trapped in a dream about Claudine, which quickly twists into a nightmare and jolts him awake as he gasps for air. He starts wondering whether it was telepathy and if Kazuna had been talking in his sleep inside the dream. The group gathers around a table when Kazuna suddenly shouts that he has no past to return to and that the time he has spent with the survivors is the happiest he has ever known. Later, they set out for an icy dungeon glittering with snow crystals, where they soon encounter a Rosado ogre. While everyone communicates quietly through telepathy, Kazuna completely ruins the point of it by charging straight at the monster, eager to show off his abilities. He performs impressively with the sword and even unveils a new technique called parallel, which allows him to create a duplicate of himself. After they defeat the ogre, Nick approaches him and mentions that he suddenly feels exhausted. Kazuna admits it was his fault, explaining that he used their stamina and magic to activate his skills. He adds that he can make up to 5 copies and that all of these techniques were borrowed from a swordsman who once wielded him. Tana bluntly calls it cheating, but Nick says he is simply relieved that Kazuna is fighting on their side. Kazuna then suggests using Union again, but Nick immediately rejects the idea, saying that any ability that leaves them collapsing after battle is far too dangerous to rely on frequently. Meanwhile, as usual, all Curran can think about is food. When they reach a food court, Nick finds his thoughts drifting back to the dream he had the night before. As they sit at the table, Curran starts giving completely useless advice about food. When Nick teases her for being the one who constantly eats through their budget, she throws the survivor's first rule right back at him, effectively shutting him up. Just as Nick begins thinking about her again, he spots his former lover Claudine sitting nearby, clearly charming another unfortunate kid who has already fallen for her act. She is crying about having to return to her mother, who supposedly does not have much time left, using sympathy to manipulate the boy. At that moment, Nick steps in beside them and starts mocking her with sharp remarks that slowly unravel her fabricated drama. The new victim turns to Claudine and asks who Nick is, and she looks ready to explode. Nick then hands the boy his present back, pointing out that it is not even her birthday, completely exposing her lie. The confused kid looks to Nick and asks whether everything Claudine told him was false. Later, while Nick is busy outlining a plan to scout a new cave labyrinth, Claudine suddenly appears and dumps a glass of juice over his head in retaliation. Nick remains perfectly calm and simply asks how her mother is doing. She even brings along the large cat-like man named Leon from earlier, who tries to intimidate Nick by warning him to treat Claudine better. Nick smirks and fires back, asking whether Leon is also a member of the Iron Kitties, which instantly makes Claudine snap and shout that the name is Iron Tigers, not Kitties. As the argument escalates, Leon tells Nick to step outside so they can settle things with a fight. Once they reach a secluded spot away from prying eyes, Nick takes an aggressive stance, ready to throw punches, but out of nowhere the big cat suddenly apologizes. He thanks Nick for finally putting an end to Claudine's nonsense and even says Nick can have her. Leon admits he has already used her enough and that she has countless enemies after her, just like Nick does. He then casually asks whether Nick has also been scamming the new recruits in his party. Nick looks furious for a moment, but then suddenly bursts into wild, manic laughter. Just as Leon starts to think they are on the same page, Nick punches him square in the chin, sending him crashing to the ground. The fight begins but ends almost instantly, since the big cat stands no chance against Teacher Nick. Nick restrains him and explains that while he does want money, scamming his own friends would render that money meaningless. At that exact moment, a new man sneaks up from behind and unleashes a surprise wind attack on Nick, catching him completely off guard. But before the guy can even finish boasting, our dragon girl suddenly drops in and launches a perfectly timed ambush of her own. At that moment, the guild lady, Vilma, arrives on the scene, and the oversized cat abruptly suggests settling everything with a bare-knuckle fight based on mathematics, naming the receptionist as the official referee. The following day, the guild lady explains that the math battle will consist of 10 rounds, with each set of problems increasing in difficulty, and that a round only ends once one side completes their calculations, with the higher score earning a free punch. Just as Curran begins to worry about how heavy the responsibility sounds, everyone is stunned when she ends up winning the draw. She immediately starts having what looks like a seizure simply from thinking about math, while Claudine's taunts make her feel like jumping off a cliff. After that, Curran takes a practice test, and Zam praises her, saying she shows solid potential once she actually studies. He hands her the graded sheet, which makes her feel down, but then cheers her up by saying that after proper training she will be an Einstein in no time. On their way out, Kazuna offers to step in and fight for them, but Zen insists that he is far too strong and that this is an issue they must resolve themselves. As a result, they spend the next several weeks carefully plotting their strategy, while Zen gathers information through his connections with the ladies he knows. On the night before the competition, Nick tells everyone that there is no doubt Claudine's team will attempt something underhanded, revealing that they have pulled similar tricks in the past. Z adds that his night ladies told him the Tigers party is far more intelligent than it appears and possesses a method of sharing information that no one can detect. Tana suspects they are using thought gems, which are essentially the two equivalent of Kazuna's telepathy. Nick tells Curran that all she needs to do is keep solving problems until Tiana gives the signal. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Claudine narrowly avoided being sold into slavery by her own parents. After that ordeal, she began exploiting her budget Taylor Swift looks to scam desperate admirers out of their money. She felt perfectly satisfied with her hustler lifestyle until Nick entered the picture. Just thinking about him snaps her out of the nightmare, and she vows to make him pay for turning her life upside down. On the day of the competition, the Catgirl hands out the problem sheets to both contestants, and Curran feels relieved when she sees that the questions are not difficult. Claudine, however, mocks her, saying even children could breeze through the first problem. At the same time, Nick faces Tiger Man Leon in combat and notices that Leon is not fighting back, making Nick suspect the guy is simply stalling for time. Watching Nick struggle, Curran starts to worry, but then locks in and finishes her calculations first. As she flashes Claudine a confident smile, the Catgirl announces the scores, revealing that Claudine completely outclassed her with a near-perfect result, which Zam had expected since Curran rushed to finish. Nick still cracks a joke about how the little cat man's fluffy paws cannot hurt his rock-solid abs, but his expression quickly changes when Leon lands a dirty blow straight to his solar plexus. Even so, it is not enough to knock him out, and Nick had already anticipated that they would exploit the math portion, since Curran is clearly at a disadvantage, and aim to win purely through penalty hits. With that, Claudine secures another round, causing Curran to panic as she watches Nick get beaten because of her mistake. The Chad reassures her that she is not the one taking the hits. She cries out anyway, saying he is only getting hurt because of her tiny bird brain. Hearing this, Nick laughs and says he was prepared to take dozens of hits back when she barely scored 20 before her training. But now that he has seen her improvement, he has complete faith in her. He calls her the smartest girl he knows, which fills Curran with so much happiness that she tells Claudine to shove her trash talk straight into the garbage where it belongs. She locks into the next round, fully focused and totally unfazed by Claudine's constant yapping. Meanwhile, Tana keeps a close watch on Claudine, waiting to catch her the moment the problems become more difficult. Curran starts falling behind, while Claudine breezes through the equations by cheating like a smug little gremlin. Seeing Nick push to his limits, Shauna scans the surroundings with her magic sight but finds no visible signs of cheating. After Nick takes yet another penalty hit, Cha smacks her pipe sharply to get everyone's attention and tells the guild lady she does not have the patience to sit through a slow math duel, suggesting they release all the problems at once. The guild lady warns that doing so means whoever finishes first will almost certainly win with 7 consecutive penalty punches, but Nick just grins and tells her to go ahead. With that decision made, the Catgirl hands all the remaining sheets to Curran and the Snake Girl. Tiana keeps her eyes peeled, waiting for Claudine to finally reveal her cheating method. Seeing Curran go all out, Claudine grows arrogant and tells her accomplice hidden somewhere to bring out the calculator. As the two girls furiously scribble with their pencils, Jana detects a magic signature in the distance and moves out with the rest of the party. Nick catches on and taunts Leon about his missing teammate, which makes the Tiger Man worry that their clever plan has been exposed. Panicking, he shouts at Claudine to stop, but that only enrages her further and raises the guild lady's suspicions. Meanwhile, Claudine struggles to coordinate with the nerd stationed in the tower. At that point, Kazuna finally drops in with the rest of the party, greeting the accomplice from behind. Claudine, now at the end of her rope, grows so frustrated that she yells at the nerd for taking far too long. Right then, Tana appears with the robed idiot in tow, holding up their thought gem for everyone to see. The guild lady asks the blonde girl if she also has one, much to Chana's anger. With the truth exposed, the guards escort the oversized cat straight to jail, while Claudine starts ranting about how she has struggled her entire life and that no one has the right to blame her. Curran does not accept that excuse, and Shaw states that everyone is given a chance to change. Later that evening, the group heads to a tavern to celebrate Curran's MVP-level math performance. As he is thrown behind bars, the Tiger Man drifts into his memories, recalling an adventuring party known as the Silver Tigers. The leader of that group was Bishat, a man who stood out for his sharp intellect among the otherwise dim-witted Tigerians, and who also happened to be Leon's own brother. Thanks to Bishat's intelligence, they managed to conquer the infamous mecha-style Moonhell Labyrinth and steal the treasure hidden deep inside. However, Bishat's reckless nature ultimately cost him his life early on, leaving Leon with a deep-seated distrust of humans. At that moment, a guard enters the Tigerian cell, draws his sword without warning, and points it at Leon while demanding to know the whereabouts of the treasures his party once sold, since not even the black market retained any trace of them. When the guard asks whether he still has the treasure on him, Leon responds with a sly grin and counters by asking how the guard figured it out. It turns out there is one item Leon never dared to sell because it is far too dangerous to handle. With no other choice left, he finally summons it, revealing the Sword of Evolution, a weapon that strangely looks very similar to Kazuna. Meanwhile, the survivors are out enjoying the massive sum of money they recently earned. As the undisputed queen of gamblers, Chana sits confidently at a casino table, fully absorbed in the game while keeping a sharp watch on everyone around her. At the same time, Mick shows up to hang out with Kazuna, who originally only came to buy some ice cream but ends up extremely annoyed when it gets sold just before his turn. Since they are already there, Nick casually asks Kazuna if he wants to try gambling as well. The sword responds that he cannot, due to the ethics protocols embedded within him. That is when Kazuna notices a man holding a deck of cards and learns that those particular cards are infused with anti-magic to prevent cheating. Just then, a large and menacing lion is seen approaching the casino, clearly on the hunt for its next prey. Back inside the casino, Tana calmly breathes in the sweet scent of her approaching victory, fully confident that no one present in the room has any chance of beating her. Just as she secures her win and prepares to leave, the fearsome lion from earlier suddenly charges into the casino, throwing the entire place into chaos. The man begins scanning the area, and it quickly becomes clear that he is there for our hero, Nick, and that he is carrying a deep and personal grudge. As his thoughts lock onto Nick, it is revealed that this monster is actually Lion, and that his beast-like transformation is connected to the sword he summoned earlier. He recalls how deeply he once envied Nick. As the story flashes back to the prison cell, the sword slices through Leon's restraints and asks whether he is finally ready to unleash its destructive power, demanding to know who he intends to annihilate first. The sight of the blade and the deadly pressure radiating from it are so overwhelming that the nearby guard ends up wetting himself. Leon calmly tells the Sword of Destruction who his target is. When he questions whether the weapon is still powerful enough, it proudly snaps back that it was created 100 years ago and that technology has only deteriorated since then. Without hesitation, Leon grips the sword, shouts evolution, and transforms into a horrifying beast. As Lion continues tearing the casino apart, Tiana turns to Agate and asks who allowed the oversized cat to enter the building. She begins to panic when she realizes she handed over her weapon upon entering. At that moment, the massive cat positions himself directly in front of her and demands to know where Nick is. Kenna casually asks who he even is, but freezes the instant she realizes it is actually Leon. Shocked by how enormous he has become, she still refuses to reveal Nick's location. Leon does not take this lightly and threatens to kill her on the spot, warning that his sense of smell has evolved to the point where he can now detect lies. The woman calmly keeps the oversized cat talking, deliberately lowering his guard before suddenly blasting him with her lightning flash and scorching him. She makes a break for it, but the beast instantly recovers and hurls an entire casino table in front of her, blocking her escape. Jana's eyes widen as she struggles to comprehend how the creature healed so quickly. Thinking fast, she turns to Ajit's manager and tells him to protect her, pointing out that she is essentially his ticket to immense wealth. As the man rushes to escort her out, Shauna turns back and tells the enraged beast how important it is to rely on friends and genuinely care about others. Leon sniffs the air, using his ultra-evolved senses to detect even the smallest lie, but finds no falsehood in her words. The idea unsettles him, and he scoffs, calling it pathetic while wondering if this is what hope actually smells like. Just as Tiana points out that holding her hostage will not help draw Nick out, the massive cat lunges at her with a crushing attack, only to be stopped by Nick himself, who refuses to let Tana die on his watch. At that moment, the Sword of Evolution speaks again, warning that another sword like it is nearby before realizing that it is actually its long-lost rival, the Sword of Bonds. Thrilled by the opportunity to settle old grudges, the Dark Sword unleashes its full power on Lion, transforming him into an even larger and more monstrous form. The Sword of Bonds immediately recognizes how dangerous this situation has become, realizing that the dark weapon is devouring not only Leon's body but also his mind. As the battle erupts, Tiana calls out for Nick to use Union, and he immediately seizes the opportunity, fusing with her on the spot. From their fusion emerges a stunningly majestic, almost feminine figure with long flowing hair. Their union form unleashes a freezing attack called Ice Age, followed by another powerful strike. However, Leon pushes straight through the assault as if it were nothing. At that moment, a crack forms in his rage, and Leon begins questioning why he is doing any of this, realizing that he has no real goal and only wanted to mess with Nick for a while. But the Berserk sword has driven him too far, and now innocent people are being harmed. Sensing Leon's growing calm, the sword desperately tries to drag him back into madness, urging him to enjoy watching others suffer. This time, Leon does not fall for it. Even so, the Sword of Evolution coldly tells him that it is already too late to turn back. Leon struggles against the sword's control, trying to break free as it assaults him with his worst memories. He cries out for help, and suddenly a holy light appears, followed by Nick and Tana's majestic union form, which launches anti-magic cards to break the sword's grip. With their help, Leon is saved and once again finds himself back in his cell, reflecting on everything he has done. Nick visits him, and Leon greets him with a smirk, jokingly asking if he is just there to look at a tiger in a zoo. Nick reassures him that, fortunately, no one in the casino died, although the building itself is now completely wrecked, which visibly eases Leon's tension before Nick leaves after a short but much-needed conversation. The next day, Nick goes out for a run when he hears Agit's voice encouraging him inside his head. He thinks his simp levels are getting out of control, but when she mentions that he has to buy merchandise to reach the next level, he is disappointed by how greedy she sounds. The two take a break in the park, and Agit asks whether he has found a purpose in life, admitting she would feel guilty if he turned into a waste of oxygen like some of her fans. Nick is left speechless and thanks her for saving him from becoming a petty criminal, saying that she truly became his idol that day. Agit grows thoughtful and suddenly sentimental, which Nick realizes is the real reason she went on hiatus. Back at her boyfriend Donnie's pub, Agit, whose real name is Belle Hadjins before becoming an idol, is shown in her past. She used to sing purely for fun until a producer appeared and recruited her for his company. Her boyfriend tries to chase off the bald producer, but once he hears how much money is involved, he gives up and becomes her manager instead. That night, she watches an idol shine like a diamond on stage, igniting a desire in her heart to sing and be accepted by fans. Before she realizes it, she is part of an idol trio named after Jules. While she enjoys every moment, her life with Donnie begins to fall apart as he turns into a useless gold digger who sees her only as a walking wallet and refuses to admit his gambling addiction. A few days later, Agit sits alone, reflecting on how far Donnie has fallen from the dream he once shared with her. He used to talk about opening a bar that would make Gordon Ramsay proud. That is the day she witnesses Claudine absolutely demolish Nick's already non-existent dignity, leaving him so broken that he wanders into the rain and sits there like an empty shell. Feeling pity, she decides to talk to him. A couple of days later, Agit finds herself in a casino where Donnie gambles away his money. There, she spots an angel who is more of a gambling demon than anything else, effortlessly humiliating everyone at the table. Shortly after, the angel transforms into a magical being and slays a monster right in front of her, leaving Agit completely stunned. Later, her producer forces Donnie to sign a contract that clears all his debts on the condition that he forgets Agit and never contacts her again. Agate feels deeply saddened and tells him she truly likes him, but she is doing this because he stopped seeing her for who she is. She adds that he is bad for her now and that she is tired of trying to fix him. Donnie laughs it off and says he is going to strike it rich and prove her wrong. With a smug grin, he walks out of her life forever. After that, Nick attends Agate's comeback concert, where she opens with her usual cheerful smile and tells her fans about meeting an angel during the recent casino incident. When she mentions the aura farming knight who saved her life and disappeared without giving his name, Nick feels an eerie sense of familiarity. She shocks him further by revealing that her comeback song is about her new hero, the legendary paladin, meant to share the hope she found when she was at her lowest. After the concert, Agate uses telepathy to talk to Nick again in the park, continuing to tease him for being hopelessly delusional until he tells her to stop joking around and just say what is really bothering her. She hesitates briefly, then opens up completely, leading to a surprisingly warm and sincere heart-to-heart between them. The next day, Kazuna brings ZM a magazine featuring an article about a mysterious phantom known as the Stepping Man, a figure rumored to kidnap children at night. Kazuna gets extremely excited, explaining how the man can leap through midair and how no one has been able to catch him. Curran argues that if the man is truly evil, they should stop him. Nick counters by saying the whole thing sounds fake, but Kazuna immediately argues back like a stubborn child, insisting that the Stepping Man is real. At that moment, a green-haired woman named Olivia Taylor appears, thrilled to hear the name and proudly reveals that she wrote the magazine article. Olivia explains that whenever something suspicious happens in the city of Labyrinth, she always makes it her mission to investigate and uncover the truth. Later that night, Zam, while drunk, staggers toward a narrow alley after following a little girl, only to witness her being suddenly snatched away and vanishing before his eyes. While walking with Nick, Kazuna suddenly stops and says that Zam is in danger, prompting them to rush off and find their friend just in time as Zam stops the nearly invisible Stepping Man from kidnapping the girl. It turns out the Stepping Man is very real, and Kazuna immediately engages him in battle, though the culprit ultimately escapes. Once things settle down, Zam brings the little girl to a woman named Red, who begins tending to her. Nick questions the girl about who the man was and why she was out there. She answers that it truly was the Stepping Man and explains that her mother had been tracking him before ending up in the hospital. The group learns that her name is Ri, and Z adds that they believe her story. Suddenly, Ri asks Z to take her on as his student, clearly impressed by his bravery. But Z replies that she is still at least 15 years too young to become his disciple. She eagerly follows up by asking what she should do to prepare and train until that time comes, and Zam simply advises her to rest and to never attempt anything reckless again, especially chasing after the Stepping Man. Rihanna immediately agrees, cheerfully calling Zam her master. The next day, the survivors head to the Bounty Guild, hoping to uncover some information about the Stepping Man. However, the cat-eared woman behind the counter refuses to casually share details about high-value bounties and quickly recognizes Nick as a former member of the Masters of War. Instead, she hands them a basic assignment, tasking them with capturing a man named Hale Hardy and promising a reward of several 100,000 diners if they succeed. When the receptionist announces their party's name, other bounty hunters in the room turn to look, instantly recognizing them, with one hunter mocking them for clearly not understanding how bounty work really operates. Unwilling to let the insult slide, the gambling queen Chana challenges the man by throwing down a wager and offering him a turn. With their mission confirmed, the survivors make their way toward the slums known as Garbage Collection. Hoping to locate their target there, they approach the gatekeeper and attempt to pry some information out of him. Instead of helping, the man rambles on about someone named Greg, whose dog recently gave birth to 10 male puppies. Just as the group is about to give up and walk away, realizing he is useless, he suddenly warns them never to cross paths with someone named NGA. As they move deeper into the area, a gang of thugs tries to rob them, but the party defeats them effortlessly. Nick pressures the gang leader, who finally admits that the man they are looking for is most likely hiding in the bedrooms. Continuing onward, the group passes through the slums, witnessing firsthand the miserable living conditions endured by the residents. Kazuna quickly recognizes the location, and before long, they find their target. Hale attempts to flee, but they quickly restrain him with ropes. At that moment, a bald man appears and introduces himself as NGA, declaring that Hale is his patient. He angrily demands to know why they are taking him away. Nick calmly explains the situation, and after a brief exchange, Ngava reluctantly allows them to leave, stating that a sinner like himself cannot be forgiven for his crimes. It is revealed that Ngava is also a former priest and is qualified to treat highly contagious diseases, though for unknown reasons, he is now confined to the slums. Kazuna tries to question NGA about the stepping man, but they gain no useful information. The survivors return to the guild to collect their reward, and Tiana seizes the moment to brag about winning the bet so easily. She gathers her winnings and goes straight to the counter, buying free drinks for everyone in the guild and quickly winning their favor. The following day, the survivors once again approach the receptionist, hoping for any information about the stepping man. She admits she does not know much, but mentions a suspicious individual who has been seen talking to children, pointing toward Olivia, who is sitting with RNA. Growing cautious, the group decides to investigate Olivia further, suspecting she could be the culprit. Nick orders his team to block all exits. Just as he begins questioning Olivia about where she was 2 nights earlier and whether she has been kidnapping children, the woman suddenly leaps high into the air, blasts a hole through the roof, and escapes. Later, at the brothel, the group discusses the situation until an unexpected guest arrives. Zen immediately recognizes the mature blonde woman as Ada, while Nick openly admits he is a fanboy of the legendary party grand chef's famous swashbuckler. After brief introductions, Ada apologizes for her daughter Rian's reckless behavior, which Zam readily agrees with. This sends the girl into a fury, accusing her master of being a coward. Zam explains that he cannot be her master because ever since a young girl lied and caused him to be imprisoned for half his life, he has been terrified of children. He adds that his body literally freezes up around girls her age, to the point where he forgets how to breathe. She asks how he was able to protect her from the kidnappers, and Zam replies that any adult would save a child in danger, though perhaps it means he is slowly healing. Rihanna then drops the issue of her age, while Ada firmly refuses to marry her daughter off to some suspicious priest. Rihanna rejects the idea of marriage altogether, saying she has high standards for a boyfriend and only wants Zam as her master. At that point, the tone becomes serious, and Ada advises the group to abandon their pointless mission, as they have already seen that the stepping man is far beyond their capabilities. Nick steps forward and tells her she has no right to stop them. Ada fires back, calling him a foolish kid with no real strength. Nick accepts the criticism but insists he cannot stand by while children continue to be kidnapped. Ada makes it clear she is withdrawing to protect herself and ensure Rihanna does not become an orphan. Nick then asks if she would be willing to train his party instead. Seeing the party leader bow without hesitation convinces her. She begins their training by serving soup that draws out their magical potential, explaining that proper use of magic is their only chance against the stepping man. She then trains Nick in the same enhancement magic the stepping man uses, known as light body, instructing him to cross a tightrope 10 times. He astonishes everyone by completing it effortlessly until the 9th jump, or he crashes knee first into the concrete. Later that night, the stepping man targets another young girl, but Kazuna and Curran arrive just in time to save her. Zam notes that the attacks always occur at the exact same time. When Nick asks if the culprit is Olivia, the man's face glitches for a brief instant before he escapes onto a rooftop. Kazuna remarks that no ordinary human could cast so many spells and suggests the use of a magical item. Nick visits an old friend and bribes an artifact specialist with food for information. Leon tells him about an artifact called the Illusion King's Jewel, which conceals the user's presence. He explains that the spell can be broken simply by naming the user, but only if the caster is completely certain of their identity. The next day, Nick is nearly doing backflips during training, reminding himself of his early days. His former instructor had focused on building physical ability before magic, teaching him that his build did not have to be a weakness. Back in the present, Nick performs Spider-Man-like movements and lands with peak aura, though he still struggles to fully control light body. Z then brings good news, saying he has a solid lead on the stepping man. They head back to the slums, where the only new development is the discovery of a child's body. As they approach it, Kazuna warns everyone via telepathy that they are being followed, and a cloaked figure suddenly ambushes Nick. Using light body, he dodges her monstrous blows. The spell confirms Olivia's suspicion that he is the stepping man. She begins smashing the railings as if they were paper and counters Kazuna's signature technique with her own shadow clones. Nick takes the opportunity to shout at Olivia to admit the truth. She calmly pulls back her hood and confesses. Olivia explains that she is disappointed he turned out to be the stepping man, but clarifies that while she proudly cosplays as him, she is not the kidnapper, and they merely share a hobby of rooftop jumping. Setting that aside, they open the coffin together. At first, nothing seems unusual about the body, but Olivia urges them to look closer. The girl appears unnaturally perfect, revealing that their senses are being deceived by magic. Kazuna suggests a closer inspection, and they find a fragment of the Illusion King's jewel. When Olivia crushes it, the girl's true appearance is revealed. Back at the brothel, they identify her as the daughter of a runaway blacksmith's child. Zen points out that since the body was discarded with the garbage, the culprit is likely still nearby. Promising to return the girl to her parents and bring justice, Zen quietly admits that he already has a strong idea of who the stepping man really is. The following night, Nick encounters the stepping man once more on a rooftop. He taunts the faceless figure for missing his ambush, only to be surprised when the man compliments his refined martial arts. Nick grows serious and asks why he keeps using the same exposed tactics, but the stepping man responds by throwing out his chains. Nick charges in for close combat and declares that he has figured out the reason behind the kidnappings, especially near the garbage collection zones. The stepping man dismisses the claim, but Nick halts his kick inches from the man's face and withdraws. He points out the suspicious, overly qualified doctor conducting research in the slums and calls out Ngava by name. As the clouds part and moonlight illuminates him, Ngava's veil fades, and he congratulates Nick for uncovering the truth. Nick explains that it all became clear once they learned that children had yellow demon sickness, which could not spread from the slums to city children without someone deliberately orchestrating it, adding with a grin that his doctor helped him piece it together. He goes on to say that ZM had also uncovered the scheme to abduct children and use them as research subjects in a deranged pursuit of a cure. Since Ngava is clearly unwilling to continue talking, Nick rushes forward and unleashes a vicious combo. The old man reads his movements effortlessly until Nick finally lands a kick so powerful it shatters the roof and sends both of them crashing into the warehouse below. Nick smugly thanks the doctor for always choosing the same route, just as the rest of the team arrives, ready to gang up on his wrinkled body. Z takes that moment to demand why he sank so low. Ngava answers that everything he did was for his daughter. But Zam already knows that yellow demon sickness is a venereal disease and explains that the girl contracted it by accident from a patient sample while trying to follow in her father's footsteps. While no one hesitated to spread vile rumors, the old doctor erupts into a heartbreaking tirade, screaming about why his daughter had to die, before collapsing and declaring that he is now willing to sacrifice as many children as necessary to find the cure she needed. Zam feels deeply disappointed in the senior he once admired and asks how he can possibly live with himself. The doctor replies that Zam is being naive and should understand that everyone harbors a dark side. As a father, he says, his responsibility outweighs what others think of his twisted actions. Z says he has heard enough and slams the man back into reality. He asks whether the doctor even remembers the little girl whose life he stole, then explodes in anger when he realizes the bald old man has already forgotten one of his many victims. He describes the expressions on her parents' faces when he returned her lifeless body and how the entire neighborhood mourned in tears. Z reminds him that those children are not nameless strays, but loved by someone, just like his own daughter was. Ngava apologizes and admits that he once met a priest by chance and clung to him like a desperate leech until he was accepted into the clergy. Still, Z reminds him that through his clinic, he has been saving lives, and that to those people, he has always been a true doctor. Hearing such bitter positivity still being thrown at him makes the bald man laugh until he coughs up blood, claiming that stopping him will not solve everything. Zen stands firm, saying he will face whatever comes, one step at a time. Suddenly, Kazuna senses something extremely dangerous approaching fast. The instant he warns the group, a beam of energy pierces straight through the old doctor's chest. A white-masked knight appears and coldly tells the doctor that it is time for his eternal rest. He says he originally came to rescue him, but his orders changed, then boasts about destroying their precious Illusion King stone worth billions. Ngava calmly replies that his fate was sealed the moment he chose to be captured. When Z tries to reach him, the masked knight flings him aside using telepathy, telling him not to waste pity on his enemies and mocking him to save himself instead. Curran and Tiana rush in to help, but the white mask moves faster than their eyes can track and sends them flying as if they were kicked straight into another world. While Z heals the doctor, the knight tells him he always makes the same mistake by failing to put his comrades first. He calls Z's so-called kindness nothing more than a selfish urge to save the helpless and warns that this mindset will doom both him and his friends. Nick then says they need to use union, but freezes when he sees everyone barely hanging on. Olivia quickly snaps him out of it by offering to buy him time to decide. With Z giving the go-ahead, the woman goes full Jackie Chan mode and kicks the white mask into another dimension. She reveals his identity and proudly introduces herself as many things, but today she is just a dumb mommy here to teach him a lesson. White Mask claims that knowing too much ruined the cat and charges at her with his sword. She casually catches it like a hot potato and hammers him with consecutive kicks that crack his mask and force him backward. As the white mask begins regenerating, Olivia realizes she cannot break through the ancient equipment alone. Nick and Z then combine their powers, and for the first time, White Mask actually panics. Recognizing he has finally found a worthy opponent, he escalates the fight and uses gravity magic to pin Olivia to the ground. After that, he nearly crushes Nick with a sword that truly weighs more than a mountain. Nick switches to a speed-based strategy, which White Mask initially mistakes for a basic stepping spell, until he realizes Nick is actually leaping through midair. Meanwhile, just as Olivia thinks she is about to ascend to heaven, she feels the pressure ease and breaks free from the gravity spell. While White Mask is distracted by Nick's lightning-fast aerial movement, Olivia charges like Sonic the Hedgehog and launches a massive boulder at him, which he narrowly dodges. White Mask then focuses on Nick and catches him, convinced he is the one. Suddenly, Kazuna comes flying in like a shuriken and strikes him square in the face. Still, the knight yanks it out effortlessly and declares that he is done for the day before making a dramatic, nuclear-style exit. Everyone escapes the collapsing rubble unharmed, but Zam immediately rushes to the bald doctor's side. The old man reveals that he himself has yellow sickness and does not have long to live. As the structure continues to crumble, Kazuna warns that there is no time left, and they all flee the collapsing building. The next day, Zam mourns the loss of a great man from the world. Nick offers words of comfort, and Curran tells him he did everything he could. After wiping away a few manly tears, the group regathers as Kazuna announces that the major case is finally closed. Olivia reminds them, however, that White Mask was only one piece of a larger organization. There is always a leader pulling strings from the shadows, and with a stockpile of ancient weapons, they could unleash untold chaos. Hearing this, Nick turns to the green-haired monster of a woman and asks who she truly is in all of this. She teasingly calls him naughty for asking, then casually reveals that, like the Sword of Bonds, she bears the title of the Sword of War. From that day on, the survivors spend most of their time lying in bed, realizing just how weak they truly are after facing White Mask. As Nick stares at a broken old sword, he recalls riding in a carriage with his parents on the way to where his uncle Argus lived. He remembers his father suddenly falling silent, his mother shoving him into a hidden compartment like a toy and telling him they loved him very much. He hears swords clashing and someone shouting that Argus betrayed them. He barely escapes the fat man who steals the money and even checks the compartment. Nick's luck worsens when he runs into a massive man with a knife just as the fat man catches up. As Nick shuts his eyes, the giant finishes off the walking Big Mac and mutters an apology. Nick later learns that the man was actually his uncle Argus and becomes his student. Haunted by regret over his own uselessness and failure to protect his parents, wondering what he could have done differently, Nick lies in bed as his thoughts darken until he falls asleep. He wakes to the sound of heavy rain and Agate singing nearby, letting the umbrella she lent him slip and land on her head. They share a quiet, gentle moment, talking together through the night. Meanwhile, Zen takes over Dr. Ngaba's clinic and discovers genuine happiness in helping the people of the slums who need it most. He realizes he cannot truly hate the doctor and finally accepts his own selfish desire as he watches a patient smile. Back at Tiana's place, she spends sleepless nights reflecting on her life. Even though she keeps winning bets and is practically drowning in wealth, everything feels hollow until she tastes a delicious soup that reminds her of a dear friend who would have loved it. The following day, Curran checks on everyone and asks whether they are all doing okay. When Kazuna notices how Zam has been spending his free time, he brings up the rule they agreed on about not poking into each other's personal lives. A rule that now makes everything feel distant, especially since the job ended and that distance has slowly pulled them apart. That night, Kazuna goes to visit Zam at the clinic. When Zam tells him to leave, the boy replies that he does not need to interfere in his life just to make sure his back is covered in such a shady neighborhood. Curran comes by the next morning as well, and Kazuna tries to lighten the mood. However, when she learns that they had breakfast without her, she instantly blows up. As she storms through the streets, irritated that she still cannot get Kalios out of her thoughts, she notices a little girl about to fall for the same scam she once did and immediately gives the sleazy merchant a harsh scolding. Right after that, Nick and the others run into her and invite her to the festival. She agrees the moment Tiana mentions that there will be good food. Spending time with her friends helps wash away the lingering frustration from her previous team, and she vows to carry out her duty as a proud Dragonian who stands alongside humanity to help save the world. Just then, Olivia bursts in with outrageous news about the Demon Lord returning and White Mask being involved, only to quickly admit that it is all in her imagination and that her true talent lies in spreading fake news. Seeing everyone together makes Curran emotional, and she finally confesses that she has been thinking about her lost Dragon King's stone all by herself, even while enjoying her time with the others. Tiana tells her that she can go after it, but this time with the entire group, explaining that their rule no longer applies if she turns her personal mission into official party work. Nick jumps in and declares that the survivors are not afraid of any job. That lifts Curran's spirits, and as they all raise their hands as if posing for an awkward group photo, fireworks explode across the sky. They watch the brilliant display together as a team, their trust in one another renewed. And that is where this video comes to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.